Okay, hello, welcome everyone. We are going to chat today about the Multisensory Museum. So this chat is an introduction to a series of multisensory videos that we are launching at the AGO on our website. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. So today we meet in the virtual world, but I'd like to acknowledge that the Art Gallery of Ontario operates on land that is the territory of the Anishinaabe Mississauga Nation and was also the territory of the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. As a settler, I'm grateful to live and work on this land, and recognizing this is a really meaningful way to kind of help and share and uphold responsibilities to the people who live on the land and the land itself. It's a way to be mindful about these commitments. So I'm with Dr. Peter Coppin today. He's an associate professor in the Faculty of Design at OCAD University in Toronto, Canada, an inclusive designer, visual artist, and cognitive scientist as well. His work seeks to improve information inclusion through understanding how diverse perceptual, cultural, motor capabilities interact with interfaces and designs, such as diagrams and problem solving, and auditory alternatives to graphs and maps. So hi, Peter.
Hi, hello, good to see you.
Great to have you. And
Yeah.
Peter and I have been working together for about 4 years on a multisensory museum graduate seminar in the Inclusive Design Graduate Program at OCAD U. So we explore the processes underlining multisensory engagement, the perception of multisensory experiences, the advantages afforded by the ability to combine different sensory engagements, and the key determinants of intersensory interactions. And all of this comes together in a hands-on project where students are asked to create multisensory translations of artworks in the AGO's collection. We ask how artists and designers recruit their knowledge to inform the design of multisensory experiences. We ask how our senses work together to create stable and coherent representations of our worlds. And we also investigate how museums create and can create more inclusive experiences. So students and blind and partially sighted participants form a learning community and use co-creation to develop prototypes that engage oral, tactile, and olfactory perception using a range of high and low tech approaches. A number of these projects become part of the AGO's multisensory programming. And students participate in this course from both local and remote locations. So this year we actually had students participate from all around the world, which was really, really amazing. And so I think what we'll do is we'll start at the beginning. So Peter, would you be able to share with everyone how we started this project?
Yeah, at the time I was the graduate program director for the Inclusive Design program. So inclusive design is designing for diversity, and it attempts to cover all ranges of human diversity that professors and students encounter, but its tradition sort of comes from accessibility, okay? And I've been a professor in this program since 2012, and then I started as graduate program director in January 2017. So how this came, although I sort of started a little bit earlier, but somewhere in there, okay? And so how this began, what was sort of several converging factors, okay? So one thing was, as the new graduate program director, I created several new electives, and one of them was called Multisensory Studio Seminar, but I didn't yet have a project for it, okay? All right. The second thing that happened was, as I was talking to students about this, they are also telling me about their interests, okay? And a lot of students were taking a curatorial class, and although the class was not focused on inclusive design, but through these conversations where they were telling me about what they were learning, they became interested in it. And then a number of them actually developed a class project focused on this problem area. And then they interviewed a lot of staff at local museums, and that included Melissa, okay? So Annie Levy was one of those students. There were several other students in that group in a course called Inclusive Design Lab 2. Okay, and then as Annie began developing her major research project, which is sort of our version of a thesis, okay, and she was my advisee, we then built this theme into one of our summer courses, okay, called On Learning and Questioning. And as part of that, we organized tours with some of these museums. And one of the tours was at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And Melissa led the tour, okay, and she was showing us the prototypes. And at a certain point in the tour, I was thinking, as she was showing like one of these prototypes, which was a great start, by the way, okay, but it was definitely something where OCAD is like right next door to the Art Gallery of Ontario, and a lot of our students are professional designers and or are developing interesting research areas, and so it seemed like that we could come together and actually focus on this target problem that Melissa was sort of focused on at leading this initiative at the AGO, and it could be the target problem for this class. And so we exchanged cards in the meeting, and then I met with Annie Levy, who's a student, and this became her major research project / thesis. And because I'd sort of had that course approved, we were able to just bring the two things together really fast. And we another OCAD instructor, Bev Daiwan, actually helped with the first two versions of the class. And actually at first, Melissa was more like an informal participant, but it quickly became clear that she was like a professor, okay, like an instructor for the class, right? And so then at I think 2 years in, Melissa started co-teaching it, and then she taught it on her own this year, okay? And sort of, I guess like another relevant aspect here is I have a research group that focuses on inclusive design, but using theories of perception and cognition, and using those insights along with co-design, working with people with lived experience of disability and other forms of human difference to solve these problems. And sort of my research is sort of in this area of representation, right? So what are the properties of a picture, diagram, or text, okay? And when would you use one relative to the other? And sort of, if text is better for like abstract conceptual categories we found, whereas pictures are good for like concrete structures like a landform, okay, or an anatomical structure in science, or a map, okay, or a jar of apricots, like one of the pieces that students worked on year before last, Nikki Toe and Grace Mendez, where they create a cross-sensory translation of a jar of apricots.
It's a really beautiful image of just everyday objects that they were able to really make come alive.
Yeah, and in some years, Melissa and the AGO have sort of selected a range of art pieces to focus on, and some the students have sort of just chosen whatever they want, and it's sort of we sort of tweaked it a bit each year, and so we've had students focus on landscapes like from the group of 7, and abstract paintings from like Franz Klein, and surrealist artworks like by Otto Dix. There's one, and or even architectural features like Walker's Court, this beautiful spiral staircase, and a group of students, one who was an professional architect, another who was a professional engineer, and then another who was industrial designer, came together and they made like a 3D printed model of the staircase, but also a piece of candy you can put in your mouth. Your tongue is actually the most sensitive touch receptor in like the body, right? Okay. And then they also made little objects that were of the same type of material that the Walker's Court was made out of. Okay. And then also scent jars, so they could smell like the wood smell, the pine smell, stuff like that. So the other exciting thing in the first version is, so Annie Levy was actually able to get research ethics approval and then focus on what the students produced and sort of the journey it took them through to see how it had an impact on their understanding of inclusive design and this general area, and there were very interesting results. And over the years, there's been some really fascinating outcomes, right? So any graduate student or advanced undergraduate can enroll in the course. We use a technique called co-design, which is exactly the way it sounds. It's like design, but with the potential users or constituents or audience for the design rather than for, like Steve Murgaskey, who went on to focus on STEM education for blind and low vision students, and Brandon Biggs, who worked with his team, Enrique and Elliot Doxeter-Wynn, who developed a cross-sensory translation of William Kurlik painting. Okay, actually that year there were like 3 Kurlik prototypes. The students really loved William Kurlik, who is not well known, but at least has a big presence, at least not in the art history books. Okay, but is definitely well represented at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and who went to OCAD.
There's lots
Okay.
of connections there, right? Like lots of
Yeah,
networks
yeah,
and being able to come about it. And I think also what we really tried to build within that class was ensuring that we were co-creating, so that it
yeah,
wasn't either the museum or the learning institution dictating what would be best for blind and partially sighted participants. It was everyone coming together as a learning community to make that happen, which was, I think, and continues to be really rewarding because those
yeah,
relationships stick afterwards. We've
yeah,
talked about it a little bit, but do you want to kind of maybe speak a little bit more about what the impact of this course has
yeah,
on the students at OCAD?
yeah. So off the top of my head, I mean, it's pretty wide ranging. I mean, um, well, for one thing, it's a great experience that's very rich, okay? And so a lot of students take it in their first year, okay? And a lot of them have taken it in the first year, in their first semester, along with their core classes. And so it immediately puts them in this real world situation and a very tough problem, okay? And it really is a problem that can't really be approached from like traditional like web accessibility or accessibility approaches, right? It's sort of like you can't just use text, okay? You often need some type of sonically perceived structure or some physical object like 3D object or something like that.
I love that point that you made as well, where often when we're working within a museum context, we're coming in after the fact, and particularly for the Art Gallery of Ontario, because we're looking at works that aren't necessarily being made, contemporaneously. Like there's something that's
Yeah,
from the past. And so
right.
the Chaldane was a really great example because that's something from the 1700s. We're not able to necessarily connect with the artist. We know some of the context, we know some of the motivations for producing that artwork, but how do we then go in after the fact to create an accessible piece? So
Yeah,
that's sort of our design challenge. And then what was really wonderful about that example is that then we see that engagement and thoughtfulness about like what are the barriers to visual art and why do those exist, and see that then be implicated in someone's practice, right? So, and I think each time we go through the course, even with someone who's embedded in the museum and doing this work pretty consistently, I'm still always learning something new and really motivated by the things that students bring forward and think through in those projects. It's really about being able to co-create around the collection and really trying to make the work that we hold in our space more accessible. And one of the things I always sort of say to you is that we know through visitors research that one of the significant reasons that people don't come to an art gallery is because they feel like they need to be equipped with art historical knowledge. And I always think that's such a big shame because we all have an ability to interact with culture, be it visual, musical, whatever it may be. And we all have the ability to kind of make meaning out of that. And so it's not just the one kind of canon or mono narrative, it's really about how we all engage and think about that. So that's really important to me, and where we're bringing through these perspectives and making the collection, lowering kind of perceived and physical barriers to the collection. I think
Yeah.
also the ability for us to think creatively and theoretically, like often when you're working in a museum, it's very much about practice and trying to get programming out and being really just like kind of brass tacks about let's get this stuff done.
Yeah.
So to be able to have almost like a think tank or a course that allows all these kind of bright minds to come together and consider a design challenge that often I'm really embedded in. So it's again really amazing to have that space and time to think through it. And really fundamentally museums are about objects, right? So that's kind of what makes us the cultural spaces that we are. It isn't about dance necessarily, or it isn't about performance. It is really about what are we holding within our collection, and that fundamentally becomes a human right for access, right? To be aware of the culture that we hold on to and how we share that with the people around us. And also, particularly where you may engage in an ethnographic or an encyclopedic museum where there may be several objects. So I think about our friends at the ROM, where you can pull out one of their collection drawers and there's like maybe 100 of that one thing, where you might be able to engage a little bit more in a tactile engagement with objects. At the EGO, we may have just that one Picasso, that we have more than one Picasso, but like that one Picasso we can't really engage with in the same way, and it's often flat, right? So there's not the same interest in that. So then how are you able to share that beyond visual description, beyond just kind of describing what that object looks like? And
Yeah.
it's to me it's about exploring ideas too, and that's why this is exciting right now as well, because during the pandemic, as we move into a space where, you know, we have become less tactile, we are less willing to touch things. How do we then kind of, and this is a word we're all hearing right now, but pivot or innovate around that? And so I'm really proud of the students this year, because we really had to shift to a digital platform. And so what we're really launching today with this talk is a series of 12 videos where those students have considered artworks in the collection and created the translations as prototypes, but also produced videos that are multisensory, that include visual descriptions, the visual description of their prototype, and really prompts for people to experience the artwork in a really new way. And so those will be launched really throughout the rest of the year for everyone to experience, and they'll go on our Facebook and then live on our Access Programs page. And I think it's really for us a way to give you a bit of a foundation where all of this work came from, and to really again engage in a different way with our collection.
Yeah.
So thank you, Peter,
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
chatting with me
Yeah.
today. And thank you everybody for listening to our kind of review of our multisensory programs here at the AGO and the multisensory course at OCAD U. And again, please look out for those Facebook videos, and always you can visit our AGO.ca website to see our Access Programs page, which is under the Learning tab. And so thank you so much for your time today, and we wish you a good rest of the weekend.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.